I think that passion is absolutely core to being successful in the creative space. You have to be passionate about what you do and what you aspire to do. And when you think about it, all of this creative work is really about people. And very specifically, it's about passionate people. And that's, I think, when great things happen, when magic happens.
Hi, welcome to Everyone Is. I'm your host, Jennifer Coronado. The intent of this show is to engage with all kinds of people and build the understanding that anyone who has any kind of success is successful because they're a creative thinker. So whether you're an artist, or a cook, or an award-winning journalist, everyone has something to contribute to the human conversation. Because everyone just is. I have known Vicki Dobbs Beck for a long time. She's currently the VP of Immersive Content for Lucasfilm and Industrial Light and Magic, and has held various strategic planning roles with the company over the years. But I'm less interested in the jobs she's held over the years and more interested in how she processes information, because I love Vicki's brain. And I want to talk about what led her to what she's doing today. And I'm going to ask you a very initial provocative question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Kirkland, Washington, which was not well known when I grew up there, but it became the home of Costco.
We talk a lot about Silicon Valley, but Seattle was also a hub for technical innovation right around that area. So what was it starting there when you were growing up there, or was that even a thought? Like, what was the main industry?
Kirkland was actually an old town, and it's been around for a while, and it was kind of a very basic middle-class town. And actually we had a drive-in theater about a mile from where I grew up. And that drive-in theater got torn down, and that's where the first Microsoft offices were. And then it just expanded from there. They expanded into other buildings nearby, and then into Bellevue, and then eventually into Redmond, and of course now they're global. But that was happening when I was growing up, so it started that transition to a much more tech focus, I think probably while I was in high school, I would say. And then, it became also the home, as I said, of Costco, as well as I think it was Cost Cellular. So for a pretty small town, it had a lot of what became very big companies.
Why do you think that is? What do you think about that environment made it ripe for that?
I really have no idea, other than the fact that it probably wasn't very expensive. It wasn't very expensive real estate. It wasn't as expensive as, for example, Bellevue, which was next door, or, downtown Seattle. It was a nice little town. And so I think people may have just, decided that's where they were going to set up their offices as a result.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting how that happenstance, and look what grows out of it,
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I went to a high school that was in a district that included Mercer Island and Bellevue, Newport. All of these are very, very high-end, areas. And our high school was just sort of, like I said, it was very, very middle class. But it was interesting to be in a district that had such a diverse sort of really like socio economic diversity.
And what did your parents do when you were growing up?
My parents were both in medicine. My dad started out as a pediatrician. And my mom was a nurse. And then when I was in high school, I think, or just going into college, my dad decided that he wanted to make a big change. And so he literally went back into residency and became a cardiac anesthesiologist. And that kind of specialization has sort of since disappeared. People, who are anesthesiologists now generally do lots of different kinds, but my dad very specifically did open heart surgery. And
Wow.
then my mom got her master's in public health, so she had a lot of she wasn't just a practicing nurse, but she was also an administrator. Of course, I didn't go anywhere near medicine, nor did my siblings.
Why not?
Actually, it's a really, really hard profession, and I hate the sight of blood or
Yeah, it's probably not your
cuts or
profession.
knives or anything like that. So it was a pretty easy decision.
Well, tell me about your siblings too. How many do you have?
Well, I have a brother who's living, and then I had a sister who passed away almost 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was tough because, when you have two parents who are in the medical profession and then you lose one of your children, she died from complications of childbirth. That's a really, really tough thing to live with when you've dedicated your whole life to saving others and then, one of your own, you're not able to
Yeah.
save.
Yeah. I know you were very close to your sister, so I'm very sorry about that.
Yeah.
What were the things for you you don't like knives, you don't like blood. So no serial killing or medicine for you. So what were the things for you as a kid that were super interesting to you? Because you're such an intelligent and a pursuer of knowledge. What were the things that really fascinated you?
I loved doing a lot of different things. I did ice skating, I did gymnastics, I did ballet. I did quite a bit of ballet. And I also loved to write. And so I would write creative stories and then I would hire a friend to do illustrations for me because I couldn't draw. And, I really liked school. Actually, I was good in school and I liked school. But I think my favorite class was English.
Oh yeah. What did you like about it? What appealed to you?
I liked the writing and I liked the reading.
Yeah.
And I actually stayed in touch with my high school English teacher until he passed away,
Really?
which was probably 15 or so years ago now. But that was really interesting to stay in touch with somebody for probably 40 years.
That's great. And I know that you still on occasion write, but I wonder, Vicky, for you, what were writers that were really influential to you?
I think it was a combination of the writers and the genre that they wrote. So I was a big C.S. Lewis fan. I've read all of his works, but I was initially captivated by Chronicles of Narnia.
Yes.
And I think I heard them. They were read to me of the first time, and then I've probably read all of them, 4 or 5 times over the many years. So that's probably one of the most influential writers for me.
I remember as a little kid, I loved reading series. Like I read all the Nancy Drews, like every
Oh yeah,
single,
me too.
all 85 of them, and Anne of Green Gables. But I agree with you, like the Chronicles of Narnia, like I would sit in my closet as a little kid and hope that some sort of wardrobe would open up and you'd end up, in Narnia. So
Exactly. Oh
yeah,
boy, I dreamt of that.
yeah. Turkish delight. What is it? I need it,
Yep.
that kind of thing. So you went through high school, you were a good student. And then where from high school? What happened after that?
The irony is so I went to Stanford, but I grew up in the Seattle area, and both my parents went to University of Washington, and almost all the people I knew went to University of Washington. But when I was younger, I loved to watch college football with my dad. And every once in a while, I'd get to go to one of the games. But as a in that process, I had this huge crush on Jim Plunkett, who was he was the quarterback for Stanford team, and so I would see like those things they do at the where they show the campus, etc., and it
Hmm.
had palm trees. And I was like, I really want to go to Stanford. And my dad said, well, if you want to go to Stanford, you've got to work really, really hard. And so I did. But I mean, the reason I chose Stanford because it had palm trees and Jim Plunkett, not
That's a very
necessarily.
18-year-old girl decision.
Well, yeah, except I was like 12 at the time.
Oh, wow.
Um,
So you decided that early?
yeah. I hate it when people say, I can't do something. And so I decided, when I was 12 that I wanted to go to Stanford. And I went to my high school counselor, and he told me, I think you should, set your sights somewhere else. No one from this high school gets into Stanford. And I just couldn't believe that he would say that to me. And the other irony is that year, three people from my class got into Stanford, which we were probably some of the first kids to go to Stanford from our high school, but three in 1 year after, the counselor trying to steer me away from that.
Maybe he inspired all of them to go to Stanford because he said, no, nobody's getting into
Exactly, you
Stanford.
can't do that.
Yeah.
And then I got to Stanford, and I was pretty overwhelmed. I felt like I just wasn't as smart as everybody else. And the first thing that happened when I got there is, I met all these new people, several of whom are, my lifelong friends now. But they had all come in with AP credits. And we didn't have AP programs at high school. I didn't even know what they were. And so, one of my really close friends who lived across the hall, she came in, she was halfway through her freshman year, given her AP credits. It took me really my freshman year to kind of build up my confidence and believe that I could hold my own with all the students there. And I
Yeah.
think that was a really pivotal moment.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, which is I can't stand it when people tell me I can't do something. Why is that? Where does that come from?
I really grew up believing that, sort of where there's a will, there's a way, and that anything was possible. And so when people tell you can't do something, it's basically in direct conflict with that. The older I've gotten, obviously there are some things that are no longer possible, or maybe never were. But I really believed when I was growing up that I could do anything if I put my mind to it.
It's so funny you say that. I have this tattoo on my arm, and it says, I dream of things that never were, and ask why not, which is, a OG Bobby Kennedy quote with drafting off a George Bernard Shaw quote. So it's great. You can't have things happen unless you believe in possibilities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You have to dream.
Yeah. So you built your confidence in your freshman year, and what started to happen for you there after you felt like, oh, I finally belong in this place?
I think that, one of the things that was really important is I made some very close friends who are still my friends today, my closest friends. And I didn't have a really good idea. I majored in international relations. Well, actually, I should go back. So my first idea was that I was going to major in Egyptology.
Okay, where did that come from, Vicki?
Well, because I loved reading, like Indiana Jones like stories. For me, it was, definitely the romantic dream of discovery and exploration. My parents are like, no, we're not sending you to Stanford to become an archaeologist. So my next idea was art history. Then it went English. And they're like, why don't you choose something where you can actually get a job? They were really afraid that I was going to go to this very expensive school and not be able to get a job. So I ended up choosing international relations is because it's essentially a liberal arts degree. It's a mix
Right.
of history, political science, language. And so in effect, I didn't really have to make much of a decision because it was sort of a little bit of everything. Well, there was a moment when I was graduating where I thought I wanted to be in the CIA. Again, this sort of romanticized like 3 days of the Condor.
You were going to be an analyst?
Yeah, I wanted to be an analyst. And then, and then I wanted to be caught up in a 3 days of the Condor, type
Mhm.
adventure.
Yeah.
But I didn't do that. I
Mhm.
got a job. And I kind of like explored a couple of different things. I started out in retail. I really didn't like that. I
Mhm.
did some real estate securities. I didn't really like that. So I decided to go back to business school. And the main reason for going back to business school is I feel like it's sort of like you get one shot, like one get out of jail free card, I always call it, where
Mhm.
you can make an industry switch. And because I didn't love business school. I actually did everything I could to sort of try to find other things to do while I was at business school, which was also at Stanford. So I took creative writing.
Mhm.
I took some more Italian. I kind of did what I had to do to get my MBA and then supplement it with more creative kinds of classes and
Mhm.
activities. I did some theater, and my undergraduate was much more foundational, pivotal than my MBA, except for the fact that by getting my MBA, I was able to make a pretty radical career shift.
Yeah, it opens doors for sure. But I hear so much in like what you're talking about, Vicky. You tried English, you tried art history, you tried other things, and then you go to your MBA and you're like, I'm doing Italian and I'm doing theater, and you feel like it feels like you're always supplementing yourself with something creative to like keep whatever your job target or your education target is going. Do you think that's an accurate assessment?
I think it's very accurate. And what happened at business school is at that time, it was almost everyone either went into investment banking or management consulting. And I had a bunch of close friends who were management consultants. There was the summer job, and all the management consulting companies and investment banks came to campus to interview. I was interviewing with McKinsey, and when they interview you, they give you a spontaneous case that you're supposed to sort of talk them through how you would approach it. They gave me a case about an auto manufacturer, and it was very specifically about carburetors. And I didn't even know what a carburetor was or what it did, and I didn't really care for cars. So I started to try to talk my way through this. And it was so miserable. I just finally said, I think I should just save both of us the frustration of trying to, sort of bullshit my way through this. And so I left the interview early. And then
Wow.
my next interview was with Bain and Company, and that's where I had a lot of really close friends. And in fact, the person who interviewed me was someone that I knew quite well. And he said, I got to be honest with you. You really strike me as a very creative person and a person that gravitates toward things that are much more creative.
Mhm.
My advice to you is to get a summer job that's somewhere in the creative space. And if after that job, that summer, you still feel convinced that management consulting is what you want to do, then we can
Mhm.
talk about a full time job after you graduate. It was the absolute best advice I ever got because I did end up working for San Francisco Ballet for the summer after
Mhm.
actually volunteering to work at ILM for free and being turned down.
Let me just tell you really quickly. I Creative people always do that. They always do that. They're like, "Let me give this away for free." So continue,
Yeah, but then they
continue.
turn you down.
Right? And you're like, "Wait, I'm offering my free services."
I I did feel honestly at San Francisco Ballet, I did decide that I didn't want to work for in nonprofit arts management.
Mhm.
There's just so many different groups that are always vying for control and lots of different constituencies. So it was But that said, I loved being around dancers. I loved being in a performance sort of setting. I loved
Yeah.
the creative aspects, and so it was it was kind of a rough road to get there, but it was definitely well all worth it.
Yeah, and the thing, non-for-profits are, at least as far as arts, you talk about the constituencies, it's actually so political because you're constantly kind of hustling to keep the organization going, and you don't really, and your revenue plan is, please let me ask all these people for money
For
to
money.
keep us going,
Exactly.
which makes it harder to balance as opposed to having a business plan that you're targeting and you're going to have revenue, you know.
Yep.
So you offered to work for free at ILM, but you ultimately ended up working there with a paid gig. What did that look like? How did that come about?
I stayed in touch with them periodically through my second year in business school, and it looked like I was going to graduate without a job, which was terrifying. But about a week and a half or so before I was going to graduate, they called and said, "Would you like to interview? We have a marketing assistant position." And I said, "Sure, I would obviously love to." And they said, then your interview will be on this day at this time. And I said, I really, really want to be there. Is there any other time we can do that? Because I have a group class project presentation that I have to give. And they said, no, we're really sorry. It's sort of then or none.
Wow.
And so I talked to my group, and they're like, you got to do it. And so they basically covered for me, did the presentation between just the three of them. And I had to figure out how to get up to ILM because I was down in Palo Alto. I didn't have a car or anything. I think it took me like 2.5 or 3 hours. I mean, because I had to take buses and, everything. So I get there. Keep in mind that this is a very, very entry-level position. And I get there and they didn't really tell me. It didn't say ILM or Industrial Light Magic on the door. I was sort of wandering around a little bit because I wasn't quite sure if I was in the right place. But when I finally get there in San Rafael, there were like 15 people interviewing me at once, including the president, all of the senior executives. And I was just like, oh my gosh. I mean, of course, I just was graduating from business school. I'm like, can you imagine how much this is costing in time for them to be all interviewing me at once? It is something that's a little bit a part of the ILM culture, though. I will say I've seen it over, all these years, is that they want a kind of consensus point of view before bringing someone in. And so, you often see lots of people interviewing one person.
Yeah, I refer to it as the hippie mentality. Like, hey, man, we got to all collaborate,
Yeah,
that sort of DNA from the origins of the company, right?
exactly.
So you had 15 people interview you. How did that interview look? Like,
On top of everything else, a couple of other things were happening. First of all, they had one job, which I eventually discovered they had two people they really wanted to hire. So they took the one job and split the salary in two, which was already low. But the other thing a couple things that were happening is the then president of Lucasfilm, whose name was Doug Norby, he had decided that he thought that they needed some professional management in the organization, which I also thought was kind of funny because it's like I had just graduated from business school. It wasn't like I had a whole bunch of expertise, but that turned out to be helpful. And the second thing was, this was at a time when investment banks were investing in Hollywood, and everybody thought it was terrible, actually. These were not creative people who were trying to run very creative organizations. And most of those people had MBAs. So on the one hand, Doug Norby wanted people with professional management. On the other hand, I really didn't want to tell anybody that I had an MBA because it was just like the worst thing you could possibly say within a creative organization. So that was all kind of going on. So they were kind of curious about like, why do you want to do this? You know, why did you get your MBA? That sort of thing. And what I had decided after the disastrous management consulting episode the year before, that I wanted to work for a company whose product was inherently creative. That was my criteria. I didn't really set out to be in media and entertainment per se. I mean, I looked at, the arts, wine, fashion. I looked at a whole bunch of things, but I just kind of, my path eventually led to ILM.
And you got that job that was split in two where the salary was tiny, tiny. And this is the secret about the film business that most people don't know. The people who get paid the most are Brad Pitt. And everyone else gets paid, just a living wage. So
you don't go into this business to make money.
No,
I mean,
really
a few people do, but I always tell people, like, you make different choices, and every choice has a price. And I've loved my career, but I definitely, it's not a get rich career.
No, for sure. And I know when you got into this role, they were asking you to help develop a marketing plan and a business plan as a marketing assistant. So
Yes.
and now Vicki has jumped all over and tried these different things. And it sounds like you're like, well, you can't tell me I can't do this. So how did you go about doing that?
Well, this is where I do think, like, I have been, throughout my whole career, I've been very opportunistic, just trying to figure out a path forward. So my boss at the time, who was Rose Degnan, she asked me if I knew anything about developing a marketing plan. And I said, well, I do, because I just graduated from business school, but I don't really know anything about the industry. Do you have a business plan? And she kind of looks at me with, sort of blankly. And I said, something that just like summarizes who the competition is, 5 years of financial projections, trends, strategic initiatives, etc. Well, nothing existed. So I said, I'll tell you what, you tell me who to interview, and I will interview them, and I will write a first draft of a business plan. And even if I'm 100% wrong, at least it's something tangible for people to respond to. So that's what I did. And so I apparently wrote the first official ILM business plan.
How did you process doing that, Vicki? Like, you're basically a kid, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're like, I'll do this, fine. Like, where does that come from? How does small town Vicki get there,
Well, one of the things I've learned over these many, many years is the way my mind works. And my mind I'm a very big picture person. And I like to understand how things fit together, but I also tend to live in the future. Like, I'm always thinking like 5 or 10 years out. And that's both a strength and a weakness. The weakness is when you're in like a management role or an operational role or something like that, it's hard for me to live in the present. And it's really necessary, I think, to do a good job in certain roles to be able to live in the present. So that was just an interesting learning about myself. But anyway, because I like to understand how things fit together. I like things to make sense. I like to have a sense of vision, like where we're trying to go, why we're trying to go there. Is it worth going there? And so by talking to, I don't remember how many people I talked to, but I want to say it was probably 8 to 10 people. And it was an unbelievable opportunity when you think about it, because I'm talking to 8 to 10 of the most senior people at ILM and just learning from them, just sort of like absorbing all of this knowledge that they had gained over many, many years. and then trying to fit all the pieces together. So
It's like,
I was very
yeah.
lucky.
It's like you went from getting your MBA to getting your MFA because
Exactly.
you're talking to all these creative people. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you bounced around within in the company. You ended up. How did you drift between the different companies within the Lucasfilm organization?
So what happened is after I apparently did the first ILM business plan, they decided to sort of pluck me out of ILM and drop me into all of these different areas of activity. The way that Lucasfilm at the time used to figure out like new business opportunities is they just started doing it, and then they were trying to figure out if it actually made sense. So I literally was kind of running around after all these little pockets of entrepreneurial activity to figure out whether they were sustainable. We did some really early, there was location-based entertainment that was using the Evan Sutherland, simulation platforms for entertainment. I mean, this would have been in like very early 90s or
That was pretty technically advanced for that time period.
very. And so the location-based entertainment stuff that we were doing was super, super cool. It was way ahead of its time. Similarly, the last stop on my journey to all these different little pockets of activity was Lucasfilm Learning. And Lucasfilm Learning was trying to do educational multimedia for the school market. I was not a technologist, not an educator. I had no experience, but I was completely taken with the vision and what they were trying to do. And it was really sort of living at that intersection of storytelling, interactivity, high fidelity media, such that it was at the time, with an education lens. But it was really project-based learning, and story was quite important there. So we did a prototype that was called Paul Parkranger and the Mystery of the Disappearing Ducks.
Say that title again.
Paul Parkranger and the Mystery of the Disappearing Ducks.
Got it. Okay.
But what was super cool about that is that the way this prototype came together is they took a professional design team, obviously on the Lucasfilm Learning side, and partnered each of those team members with a high school student. And then together they were developing a prototype for middle grade kids. So the high school kids had just come through middle grade. They were the ones that decided that a mystery format was a good one. And they created the character of Paul Parkranger. And so, basically what happens is this is back in the point and click era too.
Right.
Macintosh point and click. So you go into Paul's cabin. Paul is gone. He has left to go solve some other environmental mysteries, and there's a message for you, so you click on the recorder, and, he tells you that he needs your help because the ducks are disappearing. Every year, fewer and fewer ducks are coming back. And why? What is wrong? So anyway, there was no right or wrong answer. It was the whole goal was critical thinking and creative problem solving. You're supposed to develop a theory for why this was happening and then support that theory with all of the information that was available in Paul's cabin. It was absolutely a turning point in my career. I became obsessed with the combination, being able to bring these kinds of technologies together. But as has been the case in many times in my career, timing is everything, and that was not the right timing. We were about 30 years ahead of our time because what
Just
was
slightly.
just slightly. I mean, what was so interesting is the sort of interface of Paul's cabin and the way you clicked on things is like absolutely perfect for VR, right? You're in the cabin. You can literally access all this information dynamically, but it just made me think, like none of that was possible back then.
Well, I have to ask the question because I know Lucas Learning, you ended up having to shutter it. How there's not a lot of money in schools. Is that something that
That
you
was
guys
the problem.
covered? Yeah.
That was the problem. And it was not only is there not a lot of money, but there is a tremendous amount of bureaucracy. Now, I don't know if it's still the same today, but back in like 90 to 92, if you got adopted, which was the only place there was money, you had to do updates and be relevant for 7 years. And if you think about how fast, our understanding of the world changes, especially now, but even then, it was just really, really hard to compete. And then you're working obviously with these, huge textbook publishers. So we were working more in, I can't remember what they call it, but it's the little pool of money that doesn't go to textbooks. And then on top of everything else, quite frankly, the technology required to do these experiences was fairly complicated to set up. It was a computer-driven Laserdisc player. And so even though we managed to figure out how to get grants and other things to get the technology into the schools, there often wasn't enough training or there was turnover. And so that equipment sat in closets. And it was really, really sad. But one thing that was interesting about it, because as I said, I wasn't a technologist, I was an educator, et cetera, but I was on the cusp of groundbreaking work. And as a result, I became an expert just by being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had a ton of that. I mean, so Lucas Learning, you had to close it, and that's a terrible feeling. Particularly for people who are doing something really valuable because you're helping children as well, right? So what happened next for you? What was the next? How did Vicki go, oh, well, what do I do now,
Well, I was really, as I said, I was very, very interested in what is now called immersive entertainment, but it could have been called that then, if we had even known such was the term. I was really interested in the sort of the high fidelity media coupled with storytelling and interactivity. I was also really intrigued with transmedia, so cross-platform storytelling. I put together a business proposal for an edutainment group. So it would have been cross-platform, but the company is organized in verticals, just like Disney is.
Yeah.
And what I was proposing was this little sliver of horizontal. And it's really hard to do something that is, literally at odds with the organizational structure.
Yeah.
So I tried that. It didn't go anywhere. But I actually pitched a similar kind of idea to the Nature Company, which was a specialty retailer. And
I remember them, yeah.
Yeah, the idea was to develop a world and characters and stories that we would sort of introduce kids through comic book format, but then we'd do a whole product line that supported that. So, some character-based product and world-based product and that kind of thing. And I had the chance to work with probably one of the most innovative thinkers that I have met. He was definitely one of the people that really, really inspired me. Unfortunately, again, timing is everything. They call them big box stores or something, the Home Depots, etc.
Yeah.
were just coming online, and it really sort of crushed the specialty retail space. Eventually, they went out of business, and the work that I was doing, they essentially shut all of that stuff down. And I then did independent consulting, my biggest client being Walt Disney Company.
Well, let me ask you, independent consulting, what does that mean? And how do you, that? There's a hustle that has to happen when you're an independent consultant, right?
There is. And it's not something that I loved. I'll tell you, there are pluses to being a consultant, which is it is easier to distance yourself from things that you don't believe. Like the company's going to do what the company's going to do. You can try to guide them in a direction, but if they don't listen to you, then it's easier to, like I say, distance yourself as opposed to being inside. And so thankfully I got a big job, which was Disney.
How do you do that? How do you get that big job? What's the pitch look like?
It was lucky. It's a little complicated, but when I left the Nature Company, I was able to take all the IP that we had developed with me. I paid a nominal sum in order to have it, but I owned all the IP, which was a concept called Terratopia, Tales of Terratopia, and it was an eco-fantasy adventure, and it had characters and everything. So I actually somehow met someone at Disney who they were setting up an educational publishing group, and they were potentially interested in acquiring Terratopia. And it got all the way up to senior executive level. And over the course of, I remember it was like close to Christmas. And I used to tell people, like, if they were interested in Terratopia, I said, if you have any kids around that are between the ages of 6 and 12, let them read this and see what they think. And the senior executives did that, and the kids that he shared it with loved it. I think it was ABC actually at the time, and Disney acquired ABC. That's what it was. And so Disney is like, we have plenty of IP. We don't need any new IP. And so, but because of that sort of pitching process, etc., I made the connections inside of ABC/Disney. And then they decided, when they were doing the educational publishing, that they wanted to develop original IP and so they brought me in as a consultant instead of acquiring Terratopia.
Right.
But it was, and I did that for about 2 years. And what happened is, what Disney Educational Publishing was trying to do was almost identical to what I had pitched at Lucasfilm, where it's this little sliver across the company that is organized in verticals. And I could see the not invented here, like, we don't want your creative, we're doing our own over here. And so I saw the writing on the wall. I knew the same thing was going to happen that had happened at Lucasfilm. And so I ended up going back to ILM and taking a full-time job. And then, I was doing all kinds of strategic initiatives, et cetera, until I sort of landed in the immersive entertainment space.
So, like, I remember you were working on the CG side, you were working planning there, and then you moved over to in what was the president's office at that time and working on strategy there. And then the idea of immersive came around, and suddenly I'm like, well, Vicki's over here, and now she's over here. Like, she's shifted into a new spot. How did that shift happen? And were you like, wow, I feel like my life has led to this moment based on what you've explored? How'd that feel?
I did. I will say that I was talking to somebody the other day, a student, and I said, one thing that's interesting about my career is, out of the 34 years with Lucasfilm, only 2 of those jobs actually had job descriptions and titles. It was the first one, the marketing assistant, and it was the first one after I came back after having, working with Disney. It was an operations manager. Every other role that I've had has been more opportunistic, and where I saw an opportunity and created, and a role was created in most cases specifically for me, meaning that if I was to move from point A to point B, or role A to role B, it's not like they were going to backfill that role, because usually it's because whatever the problem that we were trying to address or the opportunity we were trying to explore it either, it either got resolved or it got underway, and then somebody else could take it from there. So I had been waiting since the Lucasfilm Learning days to the point where I thought that, because in order to do the interactivity, it had to be real time. And based on the work that was being done by the Advanced Development Group, where they were combining the talent from the games group with the talent from ILM, they created real-time content at a quality level that hadn't been achievable before. And I was like, now, this is the time to do that. And so initially I was sort of supporting it almost in a more ad hoc way by virtue of my role, leading strategic planning and initiatives. But eventually, we decided to go ahead and establish a division because we were so convinced of the compelling nature of what ADG had done that we felt that we could actually create a studio on top. And so I was a core part of that, launching the new division.
I've seen you get interviewed constantly because of who you are and what you contribute to the industry. And again, going back to who you are, because that's such a valuable part of everything. And you've been at South by Southwest, and I saw you were interviewed recently from an educational facility in Texas related to immersive stuff. What are the questions that you're like, I really want to answer this question, but nobody ever asks me that question?
Well, sometimes people have actually asked that question, and the way I respond is what do I think it takes to be successful in or what has been required to be successful and to sort of chart the course that I have. I actually did a talk on this, like what are the top 10, what's required in order to be successful. But ultimately what I realized is it kind of gets down to three things in my mind, which are more personal qualities than they are anything to do with the industry itself.
Yeah.
And the first was resilience, being really open to change, not being afraid of things that are unknown or unproven. In fact, quite the opposite. You need to sort of embrace that. But in that kind of space, when you're pioneering, etc., it's always shifting, and you have to be extremely open to adapting your point of view as you learn more and as more becomes clear. So resilience, courage. I think that in the last 10 years, I've had many, many, many sleepless nights because we were trying to do things that had never been done before. That was kind of like the core foundational principle of ILMxLAB, was to keep pushing the boundaries. But every time you push, there are moments when you just have doubts and you wonder if it's going to work, and am I going to be able to make this business make sense? Is this going to be, is what we're creating going to have an audience, etc. And then the last one is passion, and I think that passion is absolutely core to being successful in the creative space. You have to be passionate about what you do and what you aspire to do. And, when you think about it, all of this creative work is really about people. And very specifically, it's about passionate people. And and that's, I think, when great things happen, when magic happens. I think that passion is absolutely core to being successful in the creative space. You have to be passionate about what you do and what you aspire to do. And, when you think about it, all of this creative work is really about people. And very specifically, it's about passionate people. And and that's, I think, when great things happen, when magic happens.
I also think you have to creative people have to do things for themselves in order to bring their full self to work, right?
Yeah.
What do you do for yourself?
Not much. No, just kidding. But, you were talking about writing, and I used to write quite a lot. I really loved fiction writing. I was especially, interested in sort of the thriller / suspense genre. And ever since I helped start ILMxLAB, I really haven't written at all. So that's been 10 years of not writing. That's what I used to do to inspire myself creatively. I think these days, well, of course, I'm going to be retiring soon, so I'm looking forward to getting back to some of that, creative writing, and really just giving myself the time and the freedom to try stuff. In so many ways, I feel like giving birth to ILMxLAB was like my child. It was like, and it requires all of yourself, and what little I had left, obviously, I try to invest in my family and my husband, and, doing things that, that keep me connected to the present and to everything that's important to me there. But, yeah, it's been an amazing and exhausting and inspiring all at once 10 years.
Yeah, well, I look forward to you doing stuff for yourself because you are an impressive individual who gives so much to others that it's Vicki time. So
Well, thank you.
coming up for you. My last question for you, and we ask this of a lot of people on the podcast, is what does creativity mean to you?
It's a good question because there are creative results from things that you do, films, books, television, etc. But there's also creative thinking and creative problem solving. And these are things that it's really been very core to me. That's probably been my most successful creative endeavors have been because of creatively thinking about what the opportunities are and figuring out how to put the pieces together. And you and I have talked about this. I think that a lot of times people are a little too narrow in the way that they describe what it is to be creative. And I think all of us have the potential to be creative, and it doesn't necessarily mean you could draw or sing or write or all those things. It might just be how you approach problems and opportunities.
Yeah, great. Well, Vicki, thank you so much for spending time with us today. We know you're very busy, so we appreciate that.
Thank you. Well, it's very fun. It's great to talk to you as always, as it always has been over the years.
Oh, thanks, Vicki.
Thank you for listening to Everyone Is. Everyone Is produced and edited by Chris Hawkinson. Executive producer is Aaron Dussault. Music by Doug Infinite. Our logo and graphic design is by Harrison Parker. And I'm Jen Coronado. Everyone Is a Slightly Disappointed Productions production dropping every other Thursday. So make sure to rate and review and like and subscribe. Thanks for listening.